Back in June, I released a video about 8 speedruns that went from being amazing to being completely ruined. This time around, I want to discuss the exact opposite. These are 9 games that at some point were anywhere between boring and completely dead. But then, something changed. A new strategy, a rule change, or something else entirely would come along and take their games by storm. I'll be going into depth on each of these games to explain how the game originally became ruined, how these changes were found, and any drama that unfolded along the way. These are 9 tricks that saved their speedruns. You know it all too well. The trick that defines Super Mario 64 120 star in 2024, carpetless. Normally on Rainbow Ride, players are forced to pull an Aladdin and magic carpet ride their way to the top of the house. This slowed down the pace of Tippy, the most intense section of the game. If it were possible to skip this, the last few levels could become a non-stop roller coaster of difficult gameplay. Originally, the only chance runners had of skipping the carpet was through TAS-only hyperspeed wall kicks and parallel universes. Toad Fan 5 would prove carpetless was possible on July 5th, 2015. Even though you can't see it, Mario is moving like this because Toad Fan grabbed a bloated bomb and teleported to this spot. Then, he used save states to reset Mario's position until he hit 2 frame-perfect wall kicks. He ends the sequence with a ground pound, and he accomplishes the world's first carpetless.
We did it! Yes! I'm sorry, that was loud. I don't care! I did it!
While this was incredible, people were not convinced this was doable in a real run. That is, until a few years later, when Japanese speedrunning legend Zaya would pull it off altogether from the start of the stage. Theoretically, this strategy would save upwards of a minute in full game runs, which would completely blow the category open for future improvements. But the bomb setup was messy, extremely technical, and had far too many inconsistencies for RTA viability. And so, carpetless became a meme. If a run was nearly dead going into Rainbow Ride, carpetless would be the 1 in a million shot in the dark potentially able to bring it back. But despite all the chat spam, runners never went for carpetless with this inconsistent bomb setup even on the darkest of runs. But in September of 2023, 120 star would change forever. Strat Hunter Critholith would drop an absolute bomb of a YouTube video titled Carpetless Setup. This version of carpetless consisted of 2 glitchy wall kicks to make it up to the roof, and Critholith was able to find a setup that allowed runners to pull this off consistently in real time. Runners would triple jump at a precise but replicable angle, wall kick, pause buffer a switch to down right, and switch to right on the second wall kick. This discovery immediately altered the landscape of the category forever, or at least it would in theory. In practice, there were 2 major drawbacks of this setup. Firstly, there remained up to a dozen frame-perfect inputs that had to be performed in order for the setup to work flawlessly. In particular, this action of crawling around in an almost full circle bothered many top runners. They couldn't seem to consistently get the same position and angle every time. But the bigger setback was the fact that you had to hold a perfect 45-degree downright angle on the control stick in order to get the second glitchy wall kick. If you were even a single degree off from 45, the trick would fail. On a notched controller like the N64 OEM, you'd think this wouldn't be too difficult. However, many sticks were simply too inconsistent at finding the direct downright notch, even if you felt like you were holding the exact same angle every time. If the stick was off by even a single value, the trick would fail and runners would lose upwards of a minute as they died and re-attempted the trick. Despite all of these difficulties, the time save carpetless offered was too juicy to ignore and the strategy became RTA viable. Top runners would have to master this setup in order to contend for the world record in the future. However, these hardware inconsistencies frustrated many top runners learning this setup, including Suigi, arguably the greatest SM64 runner of all time. Suigi went as far as saying he would no longer learn 120 star if this inconsistent setup became standard. Fortunately, it wouldn't be standard for long. The very next day, Critholith would post an update to his carpetless setup titled Orthogonal Jones. This update only included orthogonal directions, removing the terribly inconsistent downright notch required in the previous setup. Now, runners would pause buffer at 2 different places, switching from up to down and down to right in order to make it onto the roof. Additionally, the full circle crawl was shortened to only a slight turn, to the relief of many. These changes made the setup significantly easier, and top runners found much more success practicing this updated version in the following days. Thanks to the hard work of a dedicated few, Carpetless evolved from total impossibility to a simple setup within the span of only 2 days. But if the orthogonal Jones setup wasn't discovered, it's hard to say where the 120-star category would be now. Would the awfully inconsistent downright setup become necessary for a world record? Would many more top runners quit the category out of frustration? But thankfully, we won't have to find out. A while back, Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction speedrunning died because one skip was complete ass. Literally. Auto-scroller skip, or ass for short, used to be the holy grail of time save for the game. You see, in every run of every category, there's 3 separate auto-scroller space missions: Voron Asteroid Belt, Rakkar Star Cluster, and Verdigris Black Hole. They're not planets you travel to like the rest of the levels in the game. Rather, the player is forced to go to each of these auto-scrollers on the way to different planets. They also take a combined 18 minutes to complete. In the speedrun, they were a tremendous drag on the pace of the game. There were many complaints about the auto-scrollers over the years, but a couple of developments gave people hope that someday they could be skipped. The first development was about the auto-scrollers themselves. There's no way to escape them the first time you visit them other than just beating the level. However, if you were to escape them, the game would bypass the auto-scroller entirely the next time you travel to the planet. The second development was something quite unique. Runners discovered that you can load the game outside of a pause menu. This is done by pausing the game, hovering over load, and pressing X and start on the same frame. This exploit is used very specifically. For example, there's a manipulation in the 100% category called Coordinates Early, where you can use this to put one file's Ratchet onto another file to collect coordinates. This saves half an hour in the speedrun, so it's quite useful. On January 18th, 2022, runner 24/7 Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be the first to combine these 2 ideas into one cohesive trick, and here's how it works. First, go to any of the 3 auto-scroller levels. Then, enter the pause menu and hover over Load Game. Press X and start on the same frame to store a load and close the pause menu. Now, the load screen is playing over normal gameplay. You then load your file that's on the ship level and pause the game mid-load. When you get the pause, you save the game and quit to the PS3 main menu. Interestingly, when your file is done saving, it shows that you're on planet Kerwan, the first level of the game. This is because, according to the game, you're not really on any planet when you're mid-load, so saving during the load defaults the game to the first planet. Once you load your file, you play the game normally until you reach your ship. And of course, now that you've escaped the auto-scroller, you travel to the next planet, completely bypassing the ship section. This, my friends, is auto-scroller skip. And what a good name for it, because boy was this trick ass. Ass ruined the entire game. You see, I kinda left out something important. Let's go back a couple steps. So you press X and start on the same frame to load the game outside of a pause menu, right? Now here I say, you then load your file that's on the ship level and pause the game mid-load. There, right there. Pause the game mid-load. Yeah, that's frame perfect. You can only pause the game on the exact frame the game fades completely to black. This game runs at 60 frames per second, so you have a 1/60th of a second window to hit start. So, let's play a game. For 64,000 subscribers, here's the question. How did runners deal with the precise timing of ass? Was it A, a reliable audio cue, B, a reliable visual cue, C, mashing like fuck and praying it works, or D, a Nintendo DS stylus? Well, let's eliminate these one at a time. It's not A. There's absolutely no audio after the load starts. It's not B. Being able to watch the screen fade to black is absolutely no help. It's not D. I know, I'm sorry. There actually was a strategy that used a Nintendo DS stylus, though. Runner Torpadorp used to rub a stylus over the start button of a DualShock 4 controller. This is a DualSense, not a DualShock 4, but go with me here. The logic is that the button is too small and awkwardly placed to mash comfortably with conventional two-handed mashing methods. So, by using a stylus, you can tense up your forearm and go over the button quickly. As you can probably imagine, this can really damage the controller over time. Since Torp didn't want to buy a new controller every few months, they eventually abandoned this strategy. The answer is, of course, mash like fuck. Since you're limited to one-hand mashing and the button is awkward to press, it's hard to mash this thing all that fast. Runners could maybe get around 12 inputs per second if they were strong mashers. Mathematically, this means that runners are expected to hit it 1 in every 5 times. In practice, it didn't always play out like that. This is Chili PG. This run, he failed ass for 34 minutes straight. Ass proved to be a nightmare for runners for years. Top-level competition died because people didn't want to deal with it. Beginners lost interest because they knew they'd eventually have to deal with it too. In the entire history of the trick, all 3 frame perfects were hit first try in a run 3 times. Torp hit it once and was rewarded with an immediate game crash. Yugi hit it twice, but was pretty new at the time, so he wasn't good enough yet to get world record. Eventually, a prolific and well-established Ratchet strat hunter named Robo would take a crack at Tools of Destruction. She primarily wanted to have some fun with the game, but of course, her morbid curiosity compelled her to look into ass. While she hated the trick just as much as anyone else, she knew there had to be a better method. Her hypothesis was built around saving the game. After all, the most vital part of ass is saving over the autoscroller file to turn it into a Kirwan file. With a bit of curious exploration, Robo noticed something really odd on planet Jacindu. Upon landing, the game autosaves once, and then autosaves again. It wasn't exactly clear to her why this happened, but it gave her an idea. What if there was a way to stack enough autosaves in a row that you don't have to worry about saving the game at all? Introducing the vendor. You get an autosave every time you buy a weapon from the vendor, which is normal for Ratchet games. You also get an autosave every time you buy ammo, which is weird, but very convenient. By buying individual ammo for each gun, Robo was able to stack as many autosaves as she wanted. Now that Robo had the autosaves taken care of, the rest was easy to tie together. Robo set up 2 files, one inside the autoscroller and one on a different planet. First, she'd go to the autoscroller, then immediately load the other file. Then, she'd stand next to the vendor and load the autoscroller file from outside of the pause menu. Ratchet is still actionable as the game is loading, so she presses triangle to open the vendor. Interestingly, the game is frozen as long as she's in this menu. She makes 2 purchases and exits the menu, letting the game finish the load. As the game is loading, her 2 stacked autosaves go off. She quits to the PS3 main menu, re-enters the game, and look at that, we're on planet Kirwan. To summarize everything Robo just did,
you just stack multiple autosaves and it kind of Kirwanizes.
And thus, good auto-scroller skip was born. Gas eliminated the pause button lottery and runners immediately returned to the game. Gas is 100% consistent, requires no frame-perfect inputs, and is as fast as second try ass. Robo is still testing theories to make it even faster, so someday we may get grass, or even bass. One of the most iconic saves in modern game speedrunning went to none other than Sonic Frontiers. Frontiers came out on November 8th, 2022 to great anticipation. Hundreds of runners flooded the newfound Frontiers Discord in hopes of the game being a sick speedrun. To their delight, the game ended up being a goldmine of crazy movement, creative sequence breaks, and interesting tricks. With all the fun ways people were finding to launch Sonic across the map, the future of the game was looking bright. That is, with one notable exception, the godforsaken pinball section. That's right, of all the things, it was the pinball game on Island 3 that caused the biggest headaches. This pinball minigame sucks. You win by getting 5 million points, and it's not exactly easy to do that. You've got to build up a multiplier, which you increase by picking up red rings that spawn randomly. Sometimes the spawns are nice. Sometimes they aren't. You can make the red rings spawn faster by going down to 0 lives, but then if you get a gutter ball, it's game over. Oh, by the way, gutter balls are sometimes completely out of the control of the runner. Your pinball can get the spring bounce from hell and it shoots you right to your death. Even if you decide to keep your lives for safety, gutter balls still kill your multiplier. This can cost runners as much as 5 minutes if they game over at the worst possible time. This was a bad problem, and it effectively put a timer on the game's life. If pinball couldn't be skipped, it wouldn't be long before people stopped running the game. The community hunted tirelessly from the first day of the game's release for pinball skip, and they quickly understood that this was going to be a taller task than they expected. You see, the pinball section is, in theory, unskippable. In Frontiers, an island cannot be completed until the boss is defeated. It just so happens that the trigger that unlocks the Island 3 boss is obtained by completing the pinball section. So you can't skip over the pinball section. You can even find the arena the boss is in, but there's a huge kill plane that stops Sonic from going in. You can even deload the pinball section entirely, but then nothing happens and you're soft locked until you reload. It was almost like the devs placed the pinball section in the exact worst possible spot. It felt like the runners were being taunted. No matter what angle you attack it from, the pinball section is inescapable. That is, until runner Kabali came around. On November 16th, 2022, 8 days after the game's release, he dropped Pinball Skip. This trick fundamentally abuses the game's autosave feature. By breaking this box just before entering pinball, we establish an autosave at this exact position. Then, we enter the pinball minigame, quit out, and load the autosave. You can see here that Kabali is holding down left on his analog stick as the game loads in. While the game tries to force Sonic into the pinball minigame, Sonic is still actionable for a little bit. So, Kabali is holding down left to force Sonic directly over the boss kill plane. Now, when Sonic enters pinball, his body continues falling, hits the kill plane, and dies. Normally, while in pinball, the only two options you have are to clear it or fail it. However, just like in real life, you're not supposed to die during pinball. So upon respawning, you've escaped. After taking another death, the game begins running a story progression check. Thankfully, the game is oh so stupid. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, since you died in pinball, you must not really be in pinball. Guess you finished it, congrats. Upon respawning again, you get the level flag for the boss and you dive down into the arena one last time. You die again because the kill plane is still there, but after that, the boss just spawns, I guess. And thus, pinball is finally skipped. In a way, it's kind of funny to make such a big deal out of a skip that got found just 8 days after the game's release. Still, you have to consider that most runners choose what games they speedrun based on either nostalgia or what their favorite game is. The first weeks of a new game set the tone in an incredibly important way. If the game shows promise, people will flock to it. If the game has an unbearable 3 to 5 minute minigame no one enjoys, people will leave just as quickly as they came. While Frontiers doesn't have the newness factor on its side anymore, Pinball Skip was the deciding factor that kept top-level runners around. Without it, this game would have gone from Sonic Frontiers to Sonic Blunder Years. Sonic behind its peers? Ah, you get the fucking point. We're moving on. Many people watching this probably know of the existence of Speed Demo's archive, but few know its full history. It was the early hub for speedrun record keeping in the late 2000s and early 2010s. However, the intended purpose of the website was actually to track times for Quake. An early community fostered here on SDA that would span the course of 14 years. Over that time, runners would use SDA as a place to put their best times and runs. Quake has a highly convenient feature called demos, so you can take your run right from Quake and drop it into a viewable format for anyone to watch and study. And as you can see, in the early days of Quake, there were as many as 1,300 demos submitted to SDA each year. This is especially impressive when you consider this demo list only shows demos that were new world records. But around 2010, you can see the submitted demos per year falls off a dramatic cliff. How did the original speed game lose its entire player base? Well, it's important to establish that speedrunning was a fair bit different then. With no service like Twitch available, runners mostly collaborated amongst themselves in IRC or TeamSpeak. Throughout these years, runners achieved incredible times. The most legendary of these being the first level E1M1 done in 21 seconds by Peter Horvath back in 2001. The runners decided to put together some community segmented speedruns that showed off just how fast Quake could be beaten. They started Project Quake Done Quick, which would eventually inspire the name of Games Done Quick. They released some videos together, most of which were smaller ideas. However, they wanted to create something future-proof, something that would take the world by storm. On November 4th, 2010, QDQ would release the culmination of their hard work, Quake Done Quickest. All 27 levels speedrun at a world record level on the hardest difficulty by 8 incredible runners. The video would go on to receive a large viewing and many accolades, inspiring a sequel. A month and a half later, on December 27th, Quake Done 100% Quickest would be released, going even more viral than the first one. With these two magna opera released to the world, the old guard of Quake learned a powerful lesson. Happy is the man who never achieves his goal. After these two massive projects, QDQ lost their sense of direction. With nothing left to do, many runners put the game down and went on to pursue their lives. This led us to a point where the game was so dead that in 2012, only one demo, one singular world record run, would be submitted the entire year. Things wouldn't begin to turn around until 2014. The rising popularity of Twitch would begin to attract more eyeballs to speedrunning in general. Also this year, legendary speedrunner Cool Kid would run Quake at Awesome Games Done Quick. This would attract quite a bit of attention to the game and most importantly, inspire a new runner. Over in the esports world, Finnish gamer Cookie had just retired from his professional Team Fortress 2 career. He wanted a new passion moving forward. After trying Half-Life speedruns for a bit, he found himself inspired by Cool Kid's GDQ run. So, he began running Quake. The game immediately captivated him as the difficult movement tech suited his pro TF2 background. He would go on to achieve numerous records, but his presence in the community would inspire something else. Well, not something, but rather someone. In 2016, Cookie managed to convince his ex-TF2 teammate Jukebox to also start speedrunning Quake. Jukebox would go on to become one of the most decorated Quake runners of all time. Yet it was one particular run of his that would save Quake. Earlier I mentioned the run of E1M1 in 21 seconds by Peter Horvath done back in 2001. This record was infamous because no one was able to beat it. In Quake, records must be broken by 1 full second. So while there were plenty of other 21s, including times slightly faster than Horvath's, the record would stand until someone got a 20. This record in particular fascinated Jukebox. After all, the movement of this game had evolved significantly in 15 years. The barrel boost on E1M1 was well understood by this point. Furthermore, bunny hopping was now a staple of Quake runs, including an even more powerful version of b-hopping called power bunnying. But while the game was much faster, it was also significantly harder. Jukebox got to work carefully planning every jump and every angle. For years, he plugged away at E1M1, clocking in 70,000 total level attempts. His efforts would not be wasted, and on June 23rd, 2019, he would finally achieve history. With this, E1M1 had a new world record for the first time in 17 years. Jukebox even followed this up by getting the world's first 19 later in the same year. And interestingly, as legendary as these runs would be, these still are not what saved Quake. It wouldn't be until September 20th, 2019 that Quake would be saved. On this day, YouTuber Carl Jobst would upload this Quake record took 17 years to beat. This is an incredible video, and one I highly recommend checking out if you want to learn more about Quake. There will be a link in the description. The reason this video saved Quake is not just because it got over 1 million views. It's also in part because of something brilliant Carl did at the end of the video. After going over the whole history of E1M1, he challenged everyone watching the video to beat his own personal best of 25 seconds. Tying a time of 19 seconds was outright impossible for the average person, but 25 seconds? That's pretty doable. The effects were felt immediately. New runners began flooding the Discord and submitting their demos. Moreover, many of the older runners who stopped playing after Quake Done Quickest saw Carl's video and rejoined the community. Within only a few months, SDA demo submissions ballooned to just over 200, then to 800 in 2020, and they haven't slowed down since. There's a good reason Quake is growing in popularity. The skill floor is accessible to new aspiring runners, and the skill ceiling will keep you pushing yourself day after day. The community has tons of advanced practice tools, and there's thousands of custom maps for you and your friends to try out together. Obviously, it was more than just Carl's video that saved this game. This game was kept alive by a community that refused to let the original Speed game go unrun and unappreciated. Let's pretend for a moment that you're a Borderlands 2 speedrunner in the year 2014. You boot up your stream, excited for a new day of co-op runs with your best friend. You've both been practicing and studying, and you've both decided you want world record. It's time to lock in. You both know that the characters Gage and Axton are the best co-op pair, so you lock in your preferred skin and check your starting sniper rifle. After all, the sniper is the best weapon in the early game for good aim, since you can one-shot every starting enemy with a critical hit. Oh, would you look at that? This sniper rifle is complete ass. Time to reset. You load up another run. Oh, would you look at that? This sniper rifle is complete ass too. Time to reset. Surely it can't happen 3 times in a row. Time to reset again. Onwards you go, resetting over and over until you finally get a passable sniper rifle. It's got good accuracy, but its damage parts are just barely above average. You decide it's better to take this run because it's more fun to actually play the game than it is to be trapped in reset hell for another hour. What do you know? You don't get world record because your sniper rifle wasn't as good as the one the world record holders used. After a fun day of runs, you both uninstall the game, vowing to never play this shit game ever again, and then you meet to do more runs the same time next week. While this may seem a bit exaggerated, this is pretty much what the early days of Borderlands 2 runs were like. Luck played a tremendous factor in the run because your starting sniper's stats were completely randomized. Obviously, people don't speedrun first-person shooters to gamble, they want to actually demonstrate skill. So around 2015, the Borderlands 2 community came to the decision to save their game with a stroke of genius. They would let everyone use a pre-made file bearing the holy grail of snipers. This Jacobs Gearbox Diab has the exact parts runners crave. It has 48 damage, which isn't the maximum of 60, but is enough to be able to handle every basic enemy in the starting zones. It has the Jacobs extra critical hit percentage of 160%, which is important for reasons I'll explain in a bit. And finally, it has an extremely small accuracy penalty, so the reticle stays nearly perfectly still. The larger the accuracy penalty, the more the reticle will wobble around when you're scoped in. This is especially important if you're in a party and you're not the one who's hosting the lobby, since ping can get in the way of aiming accurately. To explain why these stats are so important, you need to understand the most important glitch in all of BL2 speedruns: item duplication. This glitch was found about 2 years after the pre-made save file became standard by a runner named Victorian Kestrel. By selecting the sniper rifle, scrolling your mouse wheel quickly to swap items, and mashing the drop weapon button, you can easily turn one sniper into 6 snipers. For whatever reason, when you do this, your sniper's stats get added onto your character. So now, every time you duplicate a sniper, you'll get 160% critical hit damage added onto your character. And this adds up quickly. After only 4 sniper dupes, you're doing 640% extra critical damage. The same math applies to accuracy penalties. If you duplicate a sniper with bad accuracy, your reticle will wobble all over the place, even if you're keeping your mouse perfectly still. This will be done to duplicate a hilariously large amount of sniper rifles, which means a hilariously large multiplier on crits and accuracy. And until runners are able to access better snipers and sniper parts, this Gearbox Diaub is the perfect mix of minimal accuracy penalties and damage to get you through the early to mid game. It's even good enough that some runners, if they get unlucky and don't find a better sniper, will use it all the way through the game. To be honest, when I heard about the idea of this pre-made sniper file, I thought it sounded perfect. Removing the need to reset for an hour every time you want to do a run sounds like everything the community could want. However, there was some controversy surrounding this. Some felt it was against the spirit of the intended speedrun and believed runners should be good enough to overcome bad RNG. Once pre-made file became the community standard, these people were so upset by the decision that they eventually stopped running the game. This is an especially confusing decision when you realize that there was nothing stopping these people from playing without the pre-made save file anyway. Once these people left, the rest of the community was free to enjoy a consistent, reliable speedrun in peace. Sniper and part management strategies went from being a total crapshoot to something runners could actually lab out and practice. Every top runner of this game has the parts sheet memorized and can identify anything at a glance. As a result, the skill ceiling and overall understanding of the run increased to a level that runners were quite happy with. It's a bit unconventional to say a single sniper rifle saved an entire game, especially with a game as deep as Borderlands 2. At the same time, watch any of the BL2 Games Done Quick co-op runs. You'll see a group of runners having the time of their lives with one of the best shooters of the 2010s.
Yeah! Base turret.
Of all the categories in this video, I don't believe there's a single one that's been revived from death more than Crash Twinsanity Any%. The basic idea behind Twins Any% is simple. There's 4 hubs you have to complete, so the faster you can go between hubs, the better. However, Hub 1 was cursed with one of the most demonic looking tricks I've ever seen. This is Fountain Skip. There's not really a lot I have to explain here, other than that the spots you have to land on are extremely precise. The most evil part by far is right here. This particular spot is so tough to land on that Joester98, one of the best runners to ever touch this game, described it to me as, quote, a pixel that doesn't exist. Of all the people that ever played Crash Twinsanity Any%, only 3 people were ever able to do the trick in runs. This particular run with Fountain Skip was done by the Red Hot BR on October 18th, 2015. It was world record at the time, and it's the last documented run to ever use Fountain Skip. On top of the difficulty of Fountain Skip, the game has many tricks that, if failed, either completely soft lock or outright crash the game. These obviously lead to immediate resets, and every reset, of course, means another ride on Mr. Bones' wild fountain skip. In October 2016, the community came to the mutual decision to completely abandon running any percent. For the next 2 years, everyone only ran 100% or raced bingos. But everything would change on August 5th, 2018, when a runner and strat hunter named Bandacraft introduced Nutskip. Crash Twinsanity loads levels in chunks, and all objects are coded to be solid only within the chunk that they exist in. Conveniently, this nut is loaded in the first chunk of the game, and it's the only possible object in the chunk that could accomplish this skip. With a bit of craftiness, you can push the nut all the way to the very edge of the chunk. If you keep pushing, the nut moves past the chunk and gets completely deloaded. But there's a workaround. If you jump on top of the nut and walk from a part that is loaded onto a part that is deloaded, the game instantly warps you a set distance forward for some reason. From what I understand, no one definitively knows why it happens, but it's not like that's really the important part. What's especially interesting is that it happens over 1 frame. I mean, look at this. It's like Crash pulls a Goku and does instant transmission. This truly is a miracle strat. This nut has no reason to exist other than to teach players that you can shove circular objects into holes to make shit happen. There's also no other object in the first chunk that even comes close to being as useful as the nut. In response to Nutskip, runners rejoined the any% grind literally the next day. Before Nutskip, only 2 people had an any% run under 30 minutes. Within 2 weeks of Nutskip being found, that number got pushed to 6. Nowadays, that number is over 30. Furthermore, Nutskip didn't just revive the community's interest in running any%, it also opened the door for strat hunters to completely break the category. I mean, it makes sense, right? Who wants to hunt for strategies in a category no one's gonna play anyway? That changed overnight with Nutskip, and now the category is down to a blistering 10 minutes and 37 seconds. Who knew all it would take to save Crash Twinsanity was one big nut? If I were to tell you that Outlast, the survival horror game, is one of the most technically intense runs on this list, you probably wouldn't believe me. After all, anyone who has played this game casually knows that the movement is meant to feel slow and deliberate. It's a horror game, after all. You're not meant to feel in control. But underneath the hood of this game is a technical marvel that, when mastered, makes you feel less like the star of a horror movie and more like Neo from The Matrix. However, even with movement options in nearly every part of the game, there was something that really soured the any% category. You see, it's not very difficult to skip from the beginning of the game right to the lab in the final chapter using a technique called bush skip. Runners have been doing it for over 5 years now. And while this technique was powerful enough to shorten the game all the way to a sub 10-minute run, there was still a massive problem. Immediately after bush skip, runners were forced to watch an unskippable 3-minute cutscene. It's where this guy, Dr. Wernicke, yaps about a bunch of stupid shit that really doesn't matter in the speedrun. As you could probably guess, this didn't really make any% a particularly exciting category to run. When an 8-minute run contains 3 minutes of just waiting around, runners are bound to get bored. The Wernicke cutscene was a massive momentum halt, and any reset meant you had to watch it again, and again, and again. It's not like people didn't try to find a skip, it just seemed utterly impossible. The closest anyone got for a long time was on May 18th, 2019. On this day, legendary Outlast strat hunter Finnath posted a video called Potential Wernicke Skip. In this video, Finnath nearly gets on top of this archway. If Miles only jumped about 20% higher, this jump would be possible, and Finnath could ride the ceiling all the way past the Wernicke cutscene trigger. Every so often over the next few years, top runners and strat hunters would meet in the community Discord to try to solve Wernicke skip. This continued until July 22nd, 2022. As always, one runner came up with an idea and many others were testing it. This time around, it was a strat thought up by runner Lampoos. Unfortunately, this strat was proving as fruitless as all the others. After a couple hours of testing, most runners threw in the towel and left the call. One particular runner got so tilted with years of failure that they left this comment in the Discord. It would take less than an hour for this comment to age like milk. Exactly 53 minutes later, Lampoos would drop a nuke in the community Discord. The first ever Wernicke skip was unveiled to the world in a video titled I proud of myself / I will change the history : D 100 plus hours was spent. The first thing to note is that we're in a lab room. This specific lab room is the room right before the room that has the Wernicke cutscene. The second thing to note is that these doors are open the first time you walk past them. This means Lampoos manually closed the left door as part of the setup. Lampoos begins by vaulting over the corner of the desk into the side of the table. Vaulting significantly shrinks Miles' hitbox down to a small square. Normally, his hitbox goes back to full size once the vault ends. However, Miles' hitbox will stay this small if you land against an object or a wall. It only goes back to normal once Miles stops touching an object or a wall. So, Lampoos carefully moves Miles to the doorframe, making sure to touch something at all times. This specific technique is called wall riding, an obvious nod to the in-game killing machine named Wall Rider. Now that Lampoos is in the doorframe, he lines Miles up very carefully. With a specific angle, Lampoos gets Miles stuck in the doorframe. When this happens, Miles performs what's called a boost up and gets shot up on top of the doorframe that he's stuck in. From here, Lampoos jumps onto the thin opened door, keeping the shrunken hitbox. The trickiest part is right here, where Lampoos does one more boost up to get on top of the vent. After getting to the top, he easily runs along the ceiling, completely bypassing the Wernicke cutscene and successfully pulling off Wernicke skip. Over the next 24 hours, the world record for any percent was completely obliterated. Starting at 8 minutes and 6 seconds by JV, the record was lowered 5 different times by 4 different runners. When the dust settled, Trough-Line Black stood on top with a time of 5 minutes and 37 seconds. There's still one issue with Wernicke skip. This second boost up to get on top of the vent is, as far as the community can tell, at least somewhat random. While it's possible a completely consistent setup will be found in the future, runners work around this by just going full YOLO. The current any percent world record holder, Jokerinsky, shows this off perfectly with the cleanest Wernicke skip I've ever seen. The best part of Wernicke skip is that it opened the floodgates. Runners now had proof that any skip they could theorize is probably possible. And thanks to Wernicke skip, the game is more cohesive and fluid than ever before. In my previous video about 8 ruined speedruns, I dedicated a section to The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, specifically on barrier skip. But in this video, we're going to dive into Wind Waker HD on the Wii U to discuss the aftermath of barrier skip. Those who kept running after the discovery of barrier skip were met with a very serious problem. It was this area right here, just after the Puppet Ganon fight. You see, beyond this loading trigger is the final Ganondorf fight, and here is the spot where you use the hookshot to get to the fight. Except, now that runners skip the Earth and Wind temples using barrier skip, there is no hookshot anymore. So as runners got to this section, they were forced into one of the most brutal strategies in the game's history: Fairy Hover. By bringing Link to half a heart container, you can blow up a bomb to take Link to 0 health. Normally, this would cause a game over, but there's a slight window before the game over where Link stands up. If you hit A to jump as Link completes the standing animation, you can then mash B to repeatedly slash, pull a creed, and take Link higher. This is called zombie hovering, and you have to end a zombie hover by picking up health somehow, or else you game over when you land. To work around this, runners would grab these 2 pots that both contain fairies. They would place the pots directly under the top platform, break both of them with an arrow, and pray to Nehru above that one of the fairies would fly upwards directly into Link mid-zombie hover. If this sounds like bullshit, it's because it was. The very last trick in the entire game after playing for a full hour was to basically spin a fairy roulette wheel and reset if it didn't land on black. Normally for strategies this brutal, there tends to be an alternative strategy that loses time to the big scary trick. But for fairy hover, there was no alternative. For 9 straight months, anyone who ran Wind Waker any % was forced to take their hard-earned time saves to the coin flip gulag. Most of these runs died a brutal death, and frustrations grew so high that most runners stopped wanting to play this category altogether. That is until January 2018, when runner Gymnast86 revealed Morth Hover, the trick that saved Wind Waker HD. You see, a Morth is this tiny little cutie that latches onto Link if you step too close to it. If you kill it with your sword, it's guaranteed to drop a heart, but if you kill it with anything else, it's guaranteed to drop nothing. Normally, this information puts runners at a dead end, but there's a neat little workaround that Gymnast found. By spacing Link properly, you can kill the Morth with a sword slash while it latches onto Link. This creates a situation where the Morth is still alive, and it's guaranteed to drop a heart when it actually dies. Gymnast then uses the Deku Leaf to carefully move the Morth all the way to the top of the platform with several gusts of wind. By manipulating the Morth to go all the way to the edge of the platform, Gymnast then lines up his arrow, drops a bomb, shoots the Morth, and zombie hovers directly into the heart it drops with barely enough time before the heart despawns. And with this trick, Wind Waker HD was saved. Well, kind of. The unfortunate part is that this trick never really brought runners back to this game, since many were still too scared of another trick called manual super swimming at the start of the run. But for the brave souls that loved this game too much to quit, they no longer had to live in fear of getting to Ganondorf the evil and scary way.
Now that we have all seen the light, I invite anyone interested to come and speedrun the difficult but rewarding Wind Waker HD. Let us have fun speedrunning one of our favorite games, free from the reins of luck.
If we're talking PlayStation classic speedruns that have been saved, the first example that pops into my mind is none other than Spyro the Dragon any %. Many of you watching may not know this, but a single trick plagued Spyro any % for an entire decade. This trick is called Rat Proxy, and here's how it works. When you enter the final hub of the game, you normally have to complete Nork Cove and Twilight Harbor to unlock Nasty Nork, the final boss fight of the game. However, in 2013, a legendary strat hunter named Tuval, known by many as the man who broke Spyro in half, worked some magic. You see, when Insomniac programmed the physics of this game, they needed a way to keep players from soft-locking in case they got stuck between a wall and an enemy. So, if such a thing ever occurred, the game would launch Spyro into the air, presumably to safety. Tuval used this mechanic to his advantage in the final hub with the help of this rat. He forced Spyro between the wall and the rat, launching Spyro high in the air. Then, he used this height to go right into the nasty Nork fight, skipping Nork Cove and Twilight Harbor. This strat was immediately written off as unviable by the entire community. The rat positioning seemed random and unreliable, and actually getting a proxy launch off the rat seemed finicky at best. It wasn't until 2020, 7 years later, that a runner named Hopkid would finally change everyone's minds. He was running a category called Cheat %, which is only a couple of minutes long. When runners try shorter categories, they tend to try riskier tricks, since a reset after a minute and 30 seconds is a whole lot better than resetting after an hour. Hopkid was pushing for world record and wanted that extra edge over everyone else. So he became the first person to ever try rat proxy in runs. Despite everyone saying this trick was an unviable, unreliable mess for 7 years, he figured out how to make it better. Rather than short hop charge into the rat like Tuval did, Hopkid found a setup where you could full hop charge into the rat. While it doesn't sound like much of a difference, the additional height gave Hopkid a much larger degree of control over Spyro's positioning. Using his new rat proxy method, he grinded cheat percent relentlessly for a week straight, eventually setting world record on November 7th, 2020. While this is important to know for the history of rat proxy, we still need to talk about any percent. Even with a new rat proxy method, this trick was still deemed too hard for any percent, and for good reason. Something I've left out until now is that the rat's movement patterns are completely random. There's no pattern, there's no manipulation, and there's no strategy that makes it more consistent. You are completely at the mercy of Dorito the Rat. Look at him. Isn't he cute? He's a little cutie. I'm just saying he's kind of cute. Kind of cute. Alright, anyway. Here's some hard numbers. This is lumilaura. Lumilaura is one of the best Spyro runners of all time. She once attempted rat proxy on stream 2,000 times in a row. Out of 2,000 attempts, she successfully hit it just 47 times. Even the best runners in the world have just a 2.35% chance of hitting this trick in a run. But just like everything else in this world, sometimes all it takes is one stubborn asshole to say, screw the numbers, I want world record no matter what. And in early 2021, that stubborn asshole was Deo Man. Look at him, isn't he cute? Isn't he cute? Deo was known for running 120%, the game's longest category. After getting a very solid world record in that category, he got bored and decided to run any percent. In a cocktail of sheer confidence and willingness to grind for content, he decided he was going to get world record with rat proxy no matter what. He lost tons of runs to it, but he never quit. And on February 22nd, 2021, he finally did it.
Let's fucking go, bitch! Come on, motherfucker! Let's go! New world record, bitch! 3820! Woo!
This one world record changed the entire landscape of Spyro any percent. Nearly overnight, everyone abandoned their late-game strategies in favor of rat proxy, and the category was changed permanently. But of course, you know the math, and you know what kind of video this is. For 2 straight years, the rat murdered thousands of runs. To the credit of these runners, most of them did not quit. No matter the heartbreak or the pain, they kept on pushing. And for their patience, they were rewarded. In April 2023, a runner named Days Bagabones revealed Long Backrat, the rat proxy killer. I think this particular comment really sums the trick up. When all the Spyro runners learned about Long Backrat, it was immediately written off as unviable by the entire community. Again? You guys have to stop doing this! In the defense of the runners, the setup at the time was pretty ridiculous and not very well understood. And this is exactly where the story would have ended if not for a single Discord message. 6 months later, in late October 2023, user Bun Baroness, nicknamed Gracie, posted about Long Backrat in lumilaura's Discord. Laura was bored, so she tinkered with it for funsies. She very quickly realized that with a bit of tweaking to the setup, Long Backrat wasn't nearly as bad as everyone first thought. Here's the breakdown. You spawn in and the rat runs to its random position. You want to get in front of the rat, tangential to its hitbox. Then, you charge forward, killing the rat and launching it. You turn Spyro into the dying rat, forcing Spyro's hitbox in front. Then, when the rat lands, you're ideally in the corner where the rat's hitbox then forces you upwards as part of the game's programmed softlock prevention. From there, you land on the Twilight Harbor Dragon Head and glide into the Nasty Nork portal. It's not exactly an easy strategy, but in theory, it's consistent if you play well. Laura decided to test long Backrat in cheat percent to see how it stacked up against Rat Proxy. She got world record that day.
I don't know if that's record. That actually might have just fallen short. Oh, wait, no, that's record by a massive margin. Wait, no, that's record.
This set off a shockwave very similar to the Rat Proxy gold rush of early 2021, where everyone started doing long Backrat in runs basically overnight. This was a huge net positive for the community. More viewers tuned in each run, knowing the odds of world record for top level runners went up dramatically. Also, runner Chris LBC, one of the most influential runners in the game's history, returned to running any percent for the first time since 2018. It's crazy to think this one rat went from the destroyer of a category to its biggest savior. These are 9 saved speedruns. Some were starting to lose their popularity, some were completely dead. But through the tenacious spirit of runners who loved their games, these runs became better than ever. In my video on 8 ruined speedruns, much of the feedback that I got was people telling me I clearly didn't do enough research. I hope this time around my research was satisfactory. Speaking of which, thank you to the throng of runners who sat down with me and taught me about their games. Each of you helped make this video even better. Thank you as well to all my patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to support my content financially, you should join my Patreon as well. Thank you all for watching, and feel free to watch any of my other videos if you enjoyed this one. Hey everyone, if you made it this far, you're either a big fan of my content or you just really like the video. In either case, thank you, and I have a question for you. You see, I'm looking to make more content on general speedrunning, but this particular video format takes forever, and I'm a bit exhausted writing 40-page scripts each video. So I want to make some shorter videos on singular speedrun concepts that are easier to put out more frequently. Now back to my question. Who would you consider the greatest speedrunner of all time? I've been in this community for a long time, but I still don't know everybody, so drop a comment if you want to help me out. Serious answers, meme answers, I'm fine with anything. Also, I think a lot of you guys know this already, but I stream nearly every day on Twitch, and I've been streaming a lot more frequently on YouTube as well. So you can follow me on Twitch if you want. I guess, can we put a link, like, here? I don't know how that... Can we do that? Either way, there'll be a link in the description, and you should check me out if you liked this video and you think you fuck around with my vibes. Thank you all for watching, and if you really want to help me out, you should click the like button. I said that really deliberately because if you say, click the like button, the algorithm sometimes makes the like button, like, glow, and, like, to, like, catch your eye. It's, like, it's kind of cool. I've never had it happen on any of my videos, so, if it worked, cool. Thank you, and, enjoy your day, everybody. Bye. Until next time.